Hello and welcome to the Parkinson's Foundation Wellness Wednesday webinar. I'm Krista Ellis, Community Engagement Manager for the Parkinson's Foundation. Helping me behind the scenes are my colleagues Jenny Fearday and Laura Cameron. Today we return to our palliative care series where we will define the role of a care partner and explain why having a care partner is important for people with Parkinson's. We will provide helpful tools for care partners to recognize signs of strain and how to locate sources of support to look after your own health as a care partner. We are recording today's presentation. You will receive a follow-up email from us with a link to today's recording and other resources in the coming days. Before we begin the formal webinar, I would like to share a little bit about the Parkinson's Foundation. The mission of the foundation is to make the lives better for people with Parkinson's. Whether you are living with Parkinson's, caring for someone with Parkinson's, or working to end the disease, we are here to support you. To achieve our mission, we pursue three goals: improve care for everyone with Parkinson's, advance research toward a cure, and empower and educate our global community. Today's program is a great example of one of the things we are doing to help us meet these goals. The Parkinson's Foundation provides weekly education and wellness programs virtually through our PD Health at Home series, including Mindfulness Mondays, Wellness Wednesdays, Fitness Fridays, our expert briefings with our Chief Scientific Officer, Dr. James Beck, and Ipi Salud en Casa. You can learn more and register for these programs by visiting parkinson.org/pdhealth. Last month, we kicked off part one of a four-part webinar series for our veterans living with PD. We will continue this series on August 31st with a focus on mood changes. You can learn more about these events and register to attend at parkinson.org/veterans. We'd like to take this moment to thank PCORI, a patient-centered outcomes research institute, for their implementation award to support our palliative care series. Thank you. Today's PD Health at Home is presented by the Light of Day Foundation. We want to take this moment to thank the Light of Day Foundation for supporting the mission of the Parkinson's Foundation. As we close announcements, we settle in to explore the role of a care partner. Again, we will provide helpful tools for care partners to recognize signs of strain and how to locate resources of support to look after your own health. Dr. Miyasaki conducts research in Parkinson's disease and movement disorders. Her work focuses on palliative care for neurology, communication, quality, and novel care delivery. Dr. Miyasaki has authored several guidelines and quality measures for Parkinson's disease and other movement disorders. She has over 160 publications in peer-reviewed journals and collaborates widely on an international basis. Dr. Miyasaki is the Vice President of the American Academy of Neurology. Following the video, we will have a live question and answer session with our expert, Dr. James Miyasaki. Thank you. I'll see you guys on the other side.
Hello, and welcome to Caring for Care Partners. This is the topic that is near and dear to my heart, because when I say I know what you're going through, I truly do. My mother was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease and dementia, but she probably had Lewy body dementia. And I cared for her, including caring for her in my home. So I really do know this path that you were walking and how challenging it was for me. And I am a specialist in this disorder, so I can only imagine how challenging it can be at times for you. But I also know that being a caregiver can be very rewarding, and that is also part of the experience. It is a gift, both to the person who receives the caregiving and also to the person who gives it. Today, I'm going to list the evidence of what you are contributing to your loved one's care. Review some of the challenges for care partners of people with Parkinson's disease, and list some steps that you can take to help reduce some of the challenges that you might be experiencing. Well, what do you do? for your loved one, and you probably do it without even being aware of it. You should be attending appointments. I know a lot of people say, but I want my loved one to continue to be independent. But realistically, everyone who goes to a doctor's appointment needs a buddy, because that person is an extra set of ears, can take notes. So the person who is there for the appointment can really participate with their healthcare provider. And also, because you are the person who knows this individual best, you can give some additional history that can be very important for your loved ones, physicians, and other healthcare providers to know in order to make the best recommendations for them. Sometimes people are also organizing all the medical care. And as we all know, the older we get, you start to accumulate health problems, and it's hard to really coordinate all those players that might be touching an individual. As time goes on, and if your loved one is having challenges making decisions, and this is often characterized not necessarily by memory problems, but being more challenged to pay attention to a lot of complex information, being able to put that complex information together and come up with a good choice, being able to disregard information that is less important to him or her, and paying more attention to the information that is important to him or her. And so over time, often we as care partners have to start taking on more of the responsibility for decision making and ask for our loved one if they agree with the decisions that are being made and if they feel that this can work. You may also have to take the bull by the horns and start planning, even if your loved one doesn't want to acknowledge what's happening, or may, and this is more common, may not really appreciate how much change has taken place. There is a wide spectrum on the experience of being a care partner. And some people say, I am truly a partner. We do everything together. We make decisions together. And as time goes on, I know there is a definite group of people who say, I am a caregiver. My role has really changed and my identity has changed in this relationship. It is challenging to renegotiate the relationship too, especially if the person with Parkinson's has usually been the one to make decisions, organize the finances, and you may find yourself completely overwhelmed with these aspects. I think it is important, as we'll see in further slides, to ask for help. We should also realize that caregiving is a gift. In healthcare, we often talk about caregiving as a burden or the strain and the burden of caregiving, but I think that really does a disservice to the whole aspect of being a caregiver or care partner. It is very rewarding as well. And for many people, it affirms to them their values and the way they have chosen to live their whole life. So I want to recognize that as well, that there are positive aspects, and there are many people who derive great meaning and satisfaction from being able to be there for a loved one or a neighbor. And we also know from research that was done by Benzie Kluger, myself, and others, that when an involved caregiver is present, the person with Parkinson's actually does better. And when we said involved, we really meant like someone who's willing to encourage them to participate in things, to do social activities, and who is there frequently. And when you are able to do that, in fact, the person with Parkinson's reports better quality of life and less distress and hopelessness compared to other people who are actually physically and cognitively much better off than that individual might be. So you can see that the presence of someone who is involved and has a positive influence can really mitigate or reduce the distress from the progression of Parkinson's disease. Planning is often better when there is an engaged care partner. And by planning, what I mean is if you're living in a multi-story house on a large acreage way out in the country that is far away from government supports, that usually sooner rather than later, you have to start thinking about moving to a place that is single level, that might have wider doorways and better accessibility, as well as accessibility to the government services that you are entitled to. In my experience, it typically takes a couple, about 2 years from the time we start talking about the living arrangements to the time of actually moving. And that's understandable. You might have lived in the same house for decades. It holds many memories of your marriage, of your relationship, of your family, your children. Remember that a house is a building. And what really makes it a home are the people in it and the feelings in it and the memories. And so even though it's painful and it is a sign of a shift, it is also possible that you will find great happiness, other friendships, and you will create great memories in your new home. Often when there is an involved care partner, it's also true that adherence to the treatment plan is better. I'm sure many of you have had the experience of your loved one with Parkinson's saying, I don't need to exercise. I can watch the television, or I can exercise by walking around the TV room. As we know, exercise is really important for people with Parkinson's. It helps them move better, have better balance. They're more likely to continue walking for longer. They have better mood, and they have better feelings of self-efficacy. That is, they feel that they can do things to positively impact their health condition. And so it is helpful to have someone who really cares about you be present to help you do those things that some days you just don't feel like getting out of your warm, toasty bed. And so a care partner is very important in this respect. I know that there is a spectrum because some care partners say, you know, I feel like a nag. And I can totally understand that and appreciate it. And there does come a point where you have to decide which battles you're going to choose. You may know what is best for your loved one and what the doctors have asked you to try and incorporate. And if you can't, there are other ways to get them engaged so that you don't have to feel like you're a nag.
And managing those multiple symptoms is extremely difficult for the person, the patient, him or herself, who doesn't have the ability to do a lot of the self-care. And then for the caregiver, who ends up having to carry all of that. I think that was one of the hardest things for me as the caregiver, is that I would say for the last 2 years of Fred's life, our relationship changed from husband and wife to, you know, nurse and patient. And I really became his one-to-one aide. I had to do everything for Fred. And that included getting him on and off the toilet and wiping him and, you know, managing the catheter when he had the catheter in, and managing the extreme diarrhea when he had 8 months of colitis, and helping him get up from bed, move him from chair to chair. shower him and help him feed himself, and could never leave him alone. It was really, really difficult.
So some of the signs of caregiver strain are answering yes to the following questions in the past month. Have you felt in the past month you don't have time for yourself? Do you feel stressed between caring for your loved one and meeting other responsibilities? Does your relative who you're providing caregiving for affect your relationships with others in a negative way? Do you feel strained when you're around your relative? Do you feel your health has suffered because of your involvement with your relative? Do you feel you've lost control of your life since your relative's illness? And does your loved one display physical aggression towards you or others, or sexual aggression toward you or others? These questions are challenging to answer for many people, and yet they are important for your physicians to know. You might want to take a picture of this slide and answer the questions yourself periodically, and then share it with your loved one's neurologist or primary care physician. They are definitely a sign of strain. And the last two questions in particular can be part of Parkinson's disease. This is undergoing further research, and often trying to reduce those incidents of aggression, both physical and sexual, can be done without changing medications. But sometimes medications do need to be changed, and we need to make a choice between mobility and the person being more like themselves. I have two simple questions that I ask my patients' care partners to see if they're strained. When was the last time you slept through the night? And when is the last time you did something nice for yourself? It's interesting how many of the care partners cannot actually recall when they had a full night of sleep, or the last time they did something nice for themselves. And this is really not okay. You also have needs. You have healthcare needs. You have mental health needs, and you have social needs as well. And it's important for you to recognize this and for you to take time for yourself. And so this comes to asking for help. Asking for help is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of strength. And some of the sources of assistance are, depending on your age, your adult children could be helpful. Many of my patients and their care partners say, oh, but my children are so busy. They have their careers, they have their children. I will ask you this. When your adult children were toddlers and they got chickenpox, or they had a bad cold, or they were scared and they couldn't sleep through the night, did you say, I'm too busy to help you? You looked after them. And as part of the cycle of life, that there comes a time when you will need help. And this may be it. So I would encourage you to ask. I would say, with only 2 exceptions in my 30-year career, every adult child I have reached out to ask them to help their parents was relieved and so happy. And they said, I knew things weren't going well, but every time I ask mom and dad, they say everything's okay. So reach out for help. You'll be surprised how willing and enthusiastic your adult children can be. Many people have wonderful neighbors as well who can help out, even just picking up groceries or taking you for grocery shopping, going to the bank. These things can be helpful. Other relatives, such as siblings or nieces and nephews, your cousins, might live close by and might be able to occasionally help out. you'll probably find that you need a band of people to really help out so that you don't feel that you're imposing, and also you have many people who potentially could help in the care of your loved one. Your center of excellence and neurologists can help you as well. The centers of excellence are resources who often know what agencies in the area are helpful and welcoming to people with Parkinson's. Additionally, they will know what are your government entitlements to care and assistance in the home. Government agencies sometimes allow direct contact by patients and family members to ask about what are the resources and supports that we can access. And directly through the Parkinson Foundation, they answer literally hundreds of calls each day. They often know what is going on in different areas, as well as having a good finger on the pulse of what is available. And they keep track of things that are causing our patients and loved ones difficulty and strain. And they are really effective advocates for you with government agencies. I think in terms of support for yourself, it is important to have a safe space sometimes where you can talk about things that are challenging and that you may not want to say in front of your loved one with Parkinson's disease. This might come in the form of friends, but also many areas have caregiver support groups where people talk with one another about the challenges they've had and sometimes about the successes and the workarounds that they've had that have really made things better for them. Siblings might be helpful for you to talk to them, for you to organize a day away. One of my patients' spouses said, next weekend, my sister and my daughter organized for me to go away, and my daughter's staying with my husband, and we're going out to a spa for 3 days. I mean, that's a wonderful gift. And I think that we often overlook the people who might be willing to keep us company when we do something nice for ourselves. Mental health professionals can also be helpful. I think that is definitely a safe space for you to talk about maybe guilt and anger and frustration that you might be experiencing as part of being a care partner. A mental health professional can provide you a sympathetic ear, but should also provide some insight and strategies on how to reduce the strain of day-to-day caregiving. Your primary care provider should also be an important support for you. It is important that you do not neglect your health. Many times people tell me they can't recall the last time they saw their family doctor. You have healthcare needs as well. And so it's important for you to keep that up and to make sure that you are looking after your own health. Again, going to the Parkinson Foundation listserv for care partners, and there's a whole webpage dedicated to care partners. You can ask questions, you can chat with other care partners around the world. And I think it helps so much to understand that you are not alone in this experience. I also want you to get these thoughts out of your mind. It is not selfish to want to sleep through the night, to be able to have a shower without being anxious about what your loved one is doing and getting into. It is not selfish to go out with your friends and have a meal and not worry. It's not selfish to get a massage, go to therapy, have a weekend away, or attend a special family event. And it is not selfish for you to realize that you can no longer do this yourself. This can very gradually sneak up on you. And it is important to recognize it. You might be fortunate enough to have the financial resources to hire someone to care for your loved one and help you. But if you don't, then there are government resources that could be available to you. It's important to not view this as a failure or to view it as I've not kept up my promise, because how could you possibly promise something that you have never experienced before and that you really have limited knowledge of? Until you get into the thick of it, it is really hard to anticipate what being a care partner of someone with a chronic condition, any chronic condition, can be. So remember what the flight attendants tell you. Put on your own oxygen mask first before you try to help others. If you don't look after your own health and your own mental health, you cannot be an effective advocate for your loved one. You will not be present in the way that you want to be present. And God forbid that this happens, but what if your health becomes so compromised that you end up in hospital? And then what would happen to your loved one with Parkinson's? So it is so important that you look after yourself, because unless you are in the best physical and mental health, you can't be the care partner you want to be. And so realize that this may be the first time that you are being a care partner in this very close way. There isn't a specific timeline for anyone's trajectory, but often physicians can tell you what they expect in the short term or what might happen. That doesn't mean it's 100% going to happen, but it might be something that you want to be aware of so that if you see signs of it, you can get help, or you might want to be aware of it to start planning earlier. Planning for the future may mean making changes to your living situation. And you must be kind to yourself as you are walking this journey. Your healthcare team will help as much as the system allows, and I will be the first to admit, no matter where you are, it falls short of what we should be doing for our most vulnerable people. And that to change this, we all have to advocate. And for some of you, that may be a positive action that you can take to feel that you're doing something to help those that come behind you. But for now, remember, put on your oxygen mask first before you try and help others. And we are here for you.
Thank you, Dr. Miyasaki, and thanks for joining us today for the question and answer session of this event.
Thank you.
Any thoughts or things that might be coming up as we just finished watching this video that was recorded that you want to share before we jump into the Q&A?
Certainly, it is a journey being a care partner, and it is challenging with the current healthcare provisions or entitlements that are available. And I have to say that when I became a caregiver to my mother, I was surprised at how much I didn't know and how hard it was to access care for her. And then when I did, I was very disappointed with the level of care that she could receive. So I certainly understand the challenges. I understand how how all-consuming it can be for people, but my goal is that at our center and at all centers of excellence for the Parkinson Foundation, that we pay attention to our care partners. People often say the care partners aren't our patient, but I always say when the care partners do well, the patients do well. So really, they are part of our circle of care. And I really expect my center to live that philosophy. And I hope that more and more physicians will begin to embrace that.
Thank you, Dr. Miyasaki. We have a few questions from our attendees today along the lines of our PD journey. Laurel asks us, how can we communicate with others that we are on a PD adventure? How do we share this with our community, our friends, our loved ones?
It is challenging because I think most of Western society most of the world likes to keep a stiff upper lip. You don't want to really show when you're having strain or challenges. And I think it is important for people to be aware that just because someone can be really on for a few hours doesn't mean that's how their whole day is. I've heard multiple times my patients often tell me with pride, people can't tell I have Parkinson's. But that's not always the case 100% of the time. So I think being honest about challenges that may be present and also when you need help is important. And the other is how to renegotiate the relationship that was discussed by the care partner. It is challenging because you want to maintain the mutual respect and regard, and to also recognize their autonomy. At the same time, there comes a time, as was discussed, when people can't really make decisions, and then we ask for assent. And for some family members, because superficially, patients can sound very good for a short period of time, they may not see that there are those cognitive challenges present. And that is very painful for the care partner because some patients will become paranoid and they express this to others. And then the family, of course, says to this spouse, what are you doing? You know, they believe everything that is happening. And of course, you're so exhausted looking after the person that it's hard for you to say, and you don't want them to think differently about your spouse or loved one. It's hard for you to say, they have these thoughts that aren't really based in reality. So each step along the way, of course, respecting the privacy of your loved one, I think it's important to share what you are experiencing and what things can help you to be resilient so that you can make this long marathon.
Yeah. We do have some people living with Parkinson's joining us today, and one of our attendees, Babs, asks, how can we support our person with Parkinson's accept that they do need a care partner?
Well, I think I often say to my patients when they say, why should I bring my spouse or why should I bring my adult daughter? And I say, look, when I go to my family doctor, I take my husband. I'm a doctor and I take my husband. I think it's really challenging in healthcare. There's so much technical information coming at you often. And also, they did a study of family doctors' interactions, which are 10 to 15 minutes. The average patient remembers 3 things, And they're not the 3 things that the family doctor wanted them to remember. So just think of that, like in a specialist follow-up appointment, it's usually half an hour or 45 minutes. There's a lot of data coming at you. And often when I ask patients, what are you going to tell your spouse or your kids when they say, what did the neurologist say? They don't know what to say.
Mm.
Thus the answer, the neurologist thinks I'm doing great. And so I think it is helpful. And I usually provide a summary at the end of the visit that I print up. And patients value it and keep it. And you can see they come with a binder and they have all these notes saved up. But if your doctor doesn't do this for you, having another set of ears to hear what is being said, to also provide information, because we all want to look good to our doctor, right? So when my family doctor says, are you exercising regularly? And I say, yes. And my husband goes,
Yep.
that it is important. People sometimes say, oh, that's tattling, but it's actually to say, a good doctor will say, what's keeping you from incorporating exercise? How can we work around that? Can you see a way to still do that? So it's not so much tattling as trying to get all the things that need to be done for a chronic condition done. And it's challenging.
Yeah. Yeah. So playing agitator here, we do have a network, a community who are navigating their journey with Parkinson's on their own. So for someone who is joining us today to learn about the importance and the role and the benefits of having a care partner, that second set of ears, do you have any suggestions on how to find a quality care partner, or who you might sort of entertain or recruit to help support you in your journey of Parkinson's?
It is very challenging. In our study, we found that women were most likely not to have an engaged partner. And when we said engaged, many of these women were married, but their spouse, heartbreakingly, in the words of one patient, said, my husband doesn't think that Parkinson's is a big deal, so he won't come to the appointments. That broke my heart. So for her, I proposed her adult son, who was not living in the city, but could attend the appointments by Zoom. So that was a workaround. Many people have wonderful neighbors. I'm always impressed with some of the neighbors that come in with patients and they say, oh, I've known Mrs. Smith for, 25 years. She was always so good to my children. And when she needs help, I'm going to be the one to come and do that for her. And I just say, oh, you're a good person. So there are people like that. And I think to just think outside the box about who would you call if you were in an emergency department? Who would you call who you think would actually pick up the phone and come and help you? That's probably a good person to think of as being a potential care partner. And I think we all have that phenomena where we don't know what to do in a difficult situation, but when we see other people's difficult situations, we know exactly what to do. And your care partner is kind of like that. Your care partner's a sounding board, someone who is connected, but just a little bit separate, so that they can think of things and solutions and approaches for you that can be helpful.
Those are really Really, really strong suggestions. Thank you for offering that for our community today. Another, element of being a care partner is the need for a break. And one of our viewers, she wrote in, how do we communicate with our person with Parkinson's that I need a break? And she shares, my husband's having a hard time accepting strangers in our home. What's the best way to introduce this help from another person so that I can have some time away for myself, for friends, for my own health?
Yeah, that is, it's a very common challenge to the person who asked this question. This is something that our group works very hard on because we feel that if you introduce other people to provide some care or help early, then the person with Parkinson's comes to realize that there's more than one person who can help them. Um, and and so there are different ways to do it. Um, in Canada, we have more resources than in the United States, but I hope there are Canadian people watching. So I will say the resources we have in Canada are home care, which in the United States is called hospice. But in Canada, we don't have a time limit for home care. You can have home care indefinitely. And so we try to institute home care as early as possible when someone actually does have the need. We identify it and we work on the couple until they accept it. And that's the first step, so that they have someone coming into the house and they see, oh, this person is actually, friendly. They care about me. They do things for me. They make things better. And my spouse can go out for 2 hours and do some banking or get something done. The other way is to hire some help to come in and stay with your loved one or a family member. It is interesting. Many of my patients and their spouse, they say, oh, their kids come to visit, but they don't really look after the person with Parkinson's. And I challenge them to leave the house, say, next time you visit, I'm going to leave the house for like an hour or 2 hours to do something. Even if you go and sit in a coffee shop and just decompress for a bit,
Mhm.
it can be helpful. And once again, it institutes another person to provide care. There are also day programs that are available throughout the United States and Canada. And sometimes enrolling your loved one in a day program so that they can do exercises, get therapy, socialize with other people is another opportunity for them to be out of the house and not with you so that they can realize that they need to do these things. It's exercise for their brain to socialize on their own and not rely upon you to anticipate their every need. And so, for those of you who are earlier in the journey, I would encourage you to begin this when your loved one starts to need help so that it's already part of it and it actually helps to expand your network to provide care over time so that when things are really difficult, you don't say, I don't even know where to start.
I was speaking with a care partner recently, and she shared, I take the long way to the grocery store just to have 20 extra minutes in the car by myself. And it allows me not to feel guilty because I'm not scheduling extra time to go have a wine night with friends or go to the park and walk the dog without my loved one. It's just going to the grocery store.
And
Um,
I think that's good that she did that, and hopefully she can expand her activities to include something where she does something with friends or relatives. And but I do hear that a lot. Like I feel guilty. And also there's this tension that care partners often feel, I'm doing so much, I'm exhausted, but I'm not doing enough. They have that combined tension of that, which is a little heartbreaking to me because they are doing so much and they are trying so hard. And I used to say to one woman, I would give her a hug and say, "You're doing a great job." And she would say, "No, I'm not. I'm so mean." And I said, nobody can be a saint. And he's very happy and he is always well looked after. And she just felt she was doing less than she wanted to. So I think it's a very common feeling, um, and it is a sign of strain when you feel that way.
Couple of more questions have come in, Dr. Miyasaki. Laura asks us, is it better to let a person with PD try something physically taxing that they feel like they can do it, but the reality of it is that they can't? Do we encourage them or let them do this and fail so that they identify this on their own? Or is it better to intervene?
That's a tricky question. It's very open, but I will say what we encourage is to break it down into small steps and then to see how they can manage. So an example I will give is one of my patients. I asked her what she would like to achieve in the next 3 months. And she said, "I want to travel to the Dominican Republic to see my siblings." From where we are, that is a minimum of 2 flights in excess of 8 hours. And I said, "Well, how would you manage going to the bathroom on the plane?" She said, "Oh, the flight attendants will take me." And so I said, I think maybe a small step would be going to the museum here and spending 2 hours at the museum. And then, if that works out, traveling just outside of the city in a car for 2 hours and having a meal in another city, looking around and coming back. So at the next appointment, I asked, how did that progressive plan go? And the daughter said, "We made it to the museum. She lasted half an hour and wanted to go home." So we're doing Zoom calls more frequently with the siblings in DR, and that's how she's staying connected.
Mm.
So I think rather than allowing them to do a big task like clear their acreage, you might want to say, rather than starting with the acreage, why don't we start with the vegetable garden and see if you can weed that, and then move from there and have progressive tasks, because they might be able to do smaller tasks that give them meaning and help them feel like they have purpose, without doing something big that could be dangerous, but also it can be disheartening to them when they see, I did that with so much ease 5 years ago, and now I cannot even begin.
Really great suggestion of easing into the task at hand and seeing if we have the stamina to meet that big ask, right? Well, so Basha asks us, how do we respond when we tell someone we have PD and they say, "Oh, I'm so sorry"? She's particularly interested in not feeling the pity from her family or her friends. How do we communicate this?
Um, yeah, it is interesting. People do show their feelings or judgment in their words and their intonation. And so many of my patients will say to me, It's not how I wanted my retirement to look, but it is what it is, and I'm making the best of it. And I think that it is interesting that people make this statement, and depending on how you're feeling that day, you might ask, I'm interested, what's behind your saying you're sorry? Or to say, well, yeah, it's not what I want, but I'm still doing X, Y, and Z. I think to help people reframe what is possible is important. And it's not that people are making a negative judgment. I think it is a recognition, because I'll tell you, in the past, people would have said, oh, that's just a little shaking that you get when you're old. You'll be okay. So, there's the I'm sorry. And then there's the dismissing it completely. And neither one is great, right? And I think people are uncomfortable and they don't know what to say. And it is often hard to know what to say, but still show that you care. So yeah, I hope that answered the question, Basha.
Yeah, so I think it's more along the lines of knowing that there is sincerity when you share that you are living with Parkinson's, you and your loved one, or you alone. And it's all about perspective, is what I'm hearing too, is
Mhm.
recognizing.
And you never know, right? When someone says that, you never know, because maybe their parent had it, or maybe someone they cared about had Parkinson's or something similar, and they're expressing that. But I will tell you that I had many more patients get annoyed that people kind of dismissed them and said, oh, well, you look fine. They found that more hurtful, in at least what my patients report to me. So, although I have also heard I don't want a pity party. I want to, I, I want to be recognized as still a person. And that's the other thing, is to recognize people not as an illness, but as a person who happens to have an illness. And that you are not defined completely by this illness, that you are still, you still have all your roles that you had, and that you still have value and you still have things to contribute. And perhaps that's what many people don't see.
Basha wrote and she said, yes, thank you for answering her question. So thank you so much, Dr. Miyasaki. We have a few minutes left. We could be ending early unless someone else decides to write in a question for Dr. Miyasaki. Great. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Miyasaki. Really appreciate you showing up today for our live presentation on caring for our care partners.
You're welcome. And remember, to the care partners out there, you are doing a very important job. You contribute over $1 billion of unrecognized labor to every country. And it's important what you're doing. Never discount that, and be kind to yourself.
Beautiful words to follow up from Dr. Miyasaki. So thank you so much for your time today, and for each of you who decided to reserve this space for yourself and for your loved one. A follow-up email will be sent with a survey, so please tell us what you thought about today's program. You'll also receive a link to today's presentation with additional resources. If you had a question today, and just wasn't prepared to ask it just yet, please reach out to our helpline by calling 1-800-4PD-INFO or emailing our PD information specialists at helpline@parkinson.org. You can use that same contact information to order our free resources. We thank you for joining us today, and I hope to see you again soon. Be well.